Thank you. So what we want to cover today is general preparation, how to set up a training page on your computer, and then open up the floor to some questions. This has been recorded. We'll send this out to you guys to our WhatsApp group, and you can play it at your own leisure. To get more out of your training, you want to set up a training page. So most people, when they have their head unit set up, they have all their information they want to see there, right? So you'll have distance and time and speed and all the rest. But when it comes to training, hey, Scott, how's it going? You're just in time. So we're just chatting about setting up a training page. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you what mine looks like. And you want to focus on 4 or 5 different items. So the 5th one comes in if you have a heart rate monitor, because that's useful for us. And you want this information to be easy to access at any time during your training or your workouts, right? Because you're going to get tired, and having a separate page set up means that it's going to be easy for you to find the information. That's the trouble when you put everything on one page and your heart rate is going through the roof. And you're trying to find where your power is when there's 9 or 10 different items on there. It's just not going to go well for you, right? And there's some very important things that we want to see. So this is one of my training pages here. You can see there's a whole bunch of max power numbers, etc. This is not important at all. We're going to scroll across, and all right, this is the main one we want to see here. Now you can't see any numbers there because it's not connected to anything. But up here, the big screen is power, right? We want to see that at any time during the workout. It's especially important because we want to see how it changes. So a couple things, if you haven't set up a training page before, every computer is a little different. The Wahoo one is kind of nice because you can do it straight from your phone. There are lots of different power numbers for you to pick from, okay? So things to be careful of. Normalized power, NP, you don't want to see that. We can chat about that on another Zoom call, what that means. Another one is power balance. That's talking about the difference between left and right. Don't worry about that. Now, what we want here is power or 3-second average power. Now, there is something that's slightly different that you need to be careful of, which is average lap power, okay? So be careful about your averages. So the reason why they have that option power and 3-second power is anyone who's used a power meter, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this, your power jumps up and down quite a bit while you ride. It's not perfect because your pedal stroke isn't perfect. As your pedal stroke's going up, there's a lack of power, it gets over the top. There's a bunch of power going through the pedal and then it disappears again. So inherently, the power numbers jump quite quickly. But if you put a 3-second average to it, it'll pop up nice and clean, or at least cleaner. You'll only have jumps of 20 or 30 watts at a time, right? But we need real-time power going through here. So as you're pedaling, it's changing as you go. So that's why we have to be careful of hitting 3-second average and not average power, okay? We can come back to that if you guys have any questions. Now, underneath that, I have my lap timer. That is probably the most important thing besides your power meter, okay? Because we want when you're working hard, you don't want to do a minute more than is required. Trust me. And you want to recover just enough, right? You don't want to cut yourself short. So if we do a 15-minute interval with a 10-minute recovery, your lap timer is the one that gets that, right? So if I start this, you'll see laps will always be counting. It never, ever stops. And we're going to come back to a point that's really important, and that is to turn off your auto timers and your auto pause features, okay? So most computers have a dedicated lap button, and most people wonder, why the hell is there one button dedicated just to lap? Well, it's because it's the most important training tool you have besides displaying your power or your heart rate. So if I hit this, whoops, it'll start a brand new lap and it'll count right back from 0. It starts counting immediately, okay? It never stops. It never pauses, right? That's actually an important feature for us. Next to that is RPM. So if your power meter gives you pedal speed, it'll pop up there. And RPM can be important when we're trying to maintain power because we know that it jumps up and down a little bit. If we're trying to be smooth and we're doing something like a cypress hill climb and the gradient's fairly consistent, we can change our power by small increments by using that RPM. So if I'm pedaling at 85 RPM and I want to bring it up just 5 or 10 watts, if I pedal at 86 or 87, that will affect it pretty quickly, right? And it allows you to just fine tune that. If you're not using your RPM, you'll find your power jumps very, well, the jumps are quite drastic, right? You can jump 40 or 50 watts at a time. So just helping you be a little bit smoother and sustain your power for longer. Okay. So we've got power, lap timer, and RPM. So the next one, now this I keep on here because I coach you guys and I want to know what pace we're doing. I would say don't worry about putting speed on you. Don't do that. But put your heart rate monitor on here if you have a heart rate monitor. Have that as a fourth point. And that's just confirmation. So if your power meter ever conks out, you've got something else to use and it'll just tell you, you know, how close to your threshold heart rate you are. We can talk about that another time. That will be like a confirmation for you about what's going on here, right? And you also want to know when you're recovering. So you want to see your heart rate dip when you're doing your recoveries, okay? So ignore the speed one, that's for pace lines, but the 4 main ones there, I want you to make sure that you have, okay? So next thing to talk about is making sure that we don't upset the training page itself. And that's why we're going to turn off auto lap, auto time, or any kind of pausing features that might happen. Basically, it's now become redundant to have those features on a computer. Strava, Training Peaks, all these apps that we use to track our activities have moving time already calculated into them, right? So it will take out all your zeros where you come to a stop and subtract that from your total time. So you'll notice if you look on your Strava, it actually gives you 2 times, moving time and elapsed time. So elapsed time is from the time you leave your door till the time you come home. And moving time is that minus all the stops for traffic or taking rests, etc. So most of us like to see a nice high average speed. So when I first started training, I would pause my computer, get across a set of lights, unpause it, and let it go. However, after losing data and dropping rides and when you're doing a 200-kilometer ride and you only have 100 kilometers of data because you forgot to put your computer on, it's completely frustrating. And that's kind of been taken care of now. So try not to pause your computer. When you turn it on, you let it go. The only button that you're going to use is your lap timer and your page button to cycle through pages. Okay. So really important to turn those off. One of the major features about turning an auto pause feature off is when you recover and you're descending back down, sometimes your computer, when it's set up that way, when you come to a stop, it will stop all of its timers. So it'll upset your recovery time. You won't know if you've done a 5-minute recovery or a 10-minute recovery, okay? And if we're trying to keep those intervals nice and tight and do 15 minutes on and 10 minutes off, you'll kind of lose your place in your workout a little bit. So we turn those off. Again, it's a redundant feature. So you'll need to go into your settings to find that. Again, if you've got the Wahoo, using the phone app is very easy. If you're using a Garmin or a Sigma or something to that effect, you can usually access those features directly from the computer itself. You go into settings and then you'll find other features or whatever it is that they use to do that. Now it's cool to set up other pages too. Like I have a separate page where I have distance and speed and gradient and all those things that I'm interested in. So when we're not doing workouts, we still have access to that. So once you're comfortable using your computer, you'll have multiple pages set up with things for you to look at. So why don't we open it up to some questions? Because I'm sure just that little bit is probably stirring some questions from you guys. So if anyone wants to, turn your mic on and ask me something. Either that or I did a really good job. Okay, if you guys are cool with me moving on, give me a thumbs up. Okay, beauty. So the next thing we want to talk about is prepping and nutrition. So Scott, you got me on WhatsApp already. Let's talk about the day of, and then we'll talk about the day before. It's especially important on the FTP test because we want to get the best results we can for the first one. So on the day off, the main thing is your first meal of the day. Okay, so ideally you can eat 2 to 3 hours before you leave the house. So if your commute is going to be an hour and a half, then you need to work backwards from that. So if you're leaving at 7 a.m. to be there for 8:30, you got to get up and be eating and finish by 5 a.m. Okay, that sucks. Trust me. And I don't really do that myself. So it would be hypocritical of me to ask you to do it. If you can, you should. So when I'm getting close to race season, I will prepare food the night ahead, and I'll do like overnight oats or something really easy. And I'll wake up at 4 and I'll eat that and I'll go back to bed. Okay. And then wake up when it's time to leave. So I've had that 2 to 3 hour digestion time. Now that's not all the time. And it's not really realistic if you haven't been doing that. And it's hard to get back to sleep if you're not used to it. So realistically, most of us are eating with about an hour, hour and a half to go before we leave the house. So what we got to do is we just got to make sure that we eat foods that are easily digestible. So for example, a ripe banana and a glass of orange juice. Okay, you don't need a huge amount. You just need to get some carbohydrates in you right away. Okay, and then I always have drink mixes in the fridge ready to go. I'll have a third one and I'll just kind of sip on that as I go, as I need to. I don't want to overfill. I don't want to like go to the washroom, but I'll just kind of sip on that as I go. And I have sugars and electrolytes in there. So I'm getting a constant stream before I leave the house. The idea there is that food is really low fiber, easy to digest. It's going to get through your digestive system quickly and be accessible for you to eat. Okay. If you're in that hour and a half or less zone, you need to remove as much fiber as you can, and you need to reduce the amount of fat and protein. Okay. So that sounds counterintuitive to what we know about strength training workouts. So for example, what might suit our digestive requirements but not meet our actual carbohydrate requirements would be a smoothie. It's easy to digest because it's removed a lot of the fibers from it, and it's smooth and easy to drink. But because usually smoothies come with high protein and high fat, that's going back into the 2 to 3 hour digestion rate. So why is that important? Well, when you start to exercise, your digestive system and your muscles are competing for resources. So there's only so much blood in your body to operate all the things that are going on. So, and most of the time when we're sitting here and we're chatting right now, your digestive system is working overtime. It actually consumes most of your resources. So you're actually burning calories just having your digestive system on, as we said, right? But when you start to exercise, all that blood goes into the muscles and that slows digestion down, right? So if you're eating something heavy before you hit your ride, it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to stop the digestion process, and then you can end up with gastric distress because there's all the stuff just sitting in there not really getting broken down. Anyone who's run is familiar with the term gut rot, and it's very uncomfortable. Okay, and that can limit your performance and actually make you feel pretty unwell, right? Or the alternative is if your body starts to get into that digestion mode, it's just not going to give enough resources to the exercising muscles. It's not enough blood to run them at optimal levels, right? So we need to kind of buffer it a little bit with this big time window, or buffer it with easily digestible foods. So the next trick is if you're really late to class and you're like, crap, got a half an hour, I got to get there. Sean's going to give me shit if I'm not there on time. You want to bypass both of those methods and maybe just go for what you intend to bring on a normal ride, which would be a gel or a Lara bar or something that's very easy to digest and very quick, right? So the digestion time thing matters when you're on the bike too, right? So even something like a gel, when you start to do your workout and you start get those muscles exercising and the blood's being pulled out of your digestive system, your messaging is slowed down. So, and this is going to answer your question, Scott, about like, should I bring food for these rides? I'd say anytime a ride is over 1 hour, you should bring nutrition with you, okay? Because especially when we're talking about performance, we want to get the most out of your body, and supply is limited in the muscles. We use something called muscle glycogen. Once muscle glycogen stores get low, then your body goes into preservation mode. So getting the performance out that you want to elicit the training response that you want starts to become compromised. So if you start to eat when you get on the bike, you can automatically assume that a gel takes 20 to 30 minutes to digest, and something with more fiber is going to take more time. So something like a bar, like a Lara bar, is going to take you about 40 minutes to digest. And the signals that usually tell you when you're hungry and you're thirsty also start to slow down a bit, right? So let's say you start to feel thirsty, you haven't had anything to drink in a little while, you're probably thirsty 30 minutes ago. And if it's something like a gel that you're having, it's taking 30 minutes to get through your body. So it's 60 minutes before that's actually gets through from the time it was actually needed, right? So that can be a massive window. So generally speaking, I try to follow a little nutritional timing trick. So I eat every 20 to 30 minutes and I'll have like a nibble of something, right? So I'll have a third or a half of a bar, but every 20 to 30 minutes. So those calories are just being delivered nice and steadily. If things come in nice and steady, then your energy levels stay really high and you can perform really high, okay? Something like liquids, you want to be drinking every 10 to 15 minutes, okay? Now, liquids could come in different forms, depending on what your preferences are and what you can tolerate. I'm lucky that I've been training a long time, so putting sugary stuff in here and having gels and bars, I can tolerate that, no problem, right? In fact, I've got a massive sweet tooth, so it's no biggie. But some of us are a little bit more savory inclined, and having drink mix on top of bars and top of gels is too much, right? So there's a couple hacks. One would be to just use electrolytes with your water. It's super important to get sodium and potassium and all those things while you ride, because you're sweating it out, and it can slow down it slows down messaging through the nerves. So already we got trouble getting the messages from the digestive system to the brain. So things like that get slowed down even more, and you don't want it to affect your performance or the muscles doing their performance either. So put some electrolytes in there if that's something you can tolerate. To that end, we can actually use another hack and use maltodextrin products that are kind of flavorless carbohydrates. So if you don't like the sweet drink mixes, you can still get the carbohydrates in that you need without the sweetness. So there's products like Carb Pro, which is the triathlete product. You can buy it from Speed Theory or triathlon shops, but they don't usually include the electrolytes. So you'll need to supplement it with a Noon tablet or some Scratch Labs, or we use a company called Born, and they've helped us out for many years. So you can see their bottles there. Ooh, little plug for them. We get a discount with them, so you can buy their products called Watts and Minerals, and that can serve as your electrolytes. Now, maltodextrin makes you feel very full. So again, you can end up with gastric distress. So you want to experiment a little bit with it to figure out what you can tolerate, et cetera, et cetera. If you're looking on the back of the packages and you're figuring out like how many scoops to put in, you probably want to keep it to about 40 grams of carbohydrates per hour or less. So for a bottle like this, it'd be, I think the maltodextrin is just one big scoop. That gives me 40 grams. If I'm just doing a light training ride, I'll do half of that or even just an electrolyte. But I also like the Born products. They have a product called ISO Pro that I use quite regularly. So yeah, I have a bunch of other thoughts, but what do you guys have for questions in terms of nutrition? Surely someone's got something. Don't be shy.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, how's it going, Scott?
Good. My question was in the WhatsApp group was more like, are we just doing an FTP test, or are we going to like do more riding afterwards? Because, the FTP test is 20 minutes. I figure we're doing 20-minute warm up, right? And then it'll be a bit of a cool down afterwards. So I was like, do I really need to pack a whole bunch of stuff? Assuming I've eaten at 7 or 7:30 and all that, and like I'm feeling good and all that kind of jazz.
That's a good question. So let's talk about the day itself. So some people are going to be driving there. Not everyone's riding there. So their warm up is going to come when they arrive. So probably going to do like a 20-minute warm up. Then you guys get the coaching part. Then you're going to do a 5-minute sample. So if you've ever looked at a trainer road FTP test, They're an hour long, right? 20-minute warm up, 5-minute sample. There's a couple little speed drills that they make you do. Then there's a final 5-minute cool down, and then there's the 20-minute test itself. So you're right, the 20-minute test is the FTP test, but there's going to be a bunch of stuff going up there, and we also have to take time to coach you. So there'll be 20-minute warm up, coaching piece, 5-minute sample, and we want to do that so you guys can make mistakes and we can fix them before you do the actual FTP test. So if your power meter isn't connecting, we can get that online. If you're feeling peckish, it's a good time to get all that done, right? And then take your recovery, final coaching bit on how to do the 20-minute test the best way on Cypress, and then away you go, right? So there's going to be quite a bit of time there. And if you guys are riding from home, yeah, pack some food and have it as you go and nibble all the way up, right? So you're feeling like topped up the whole time. Yeah. So just in case, bring a couple bars with you and drink mix. When you guys finish up, what we're encouraging the coaches to do is to give you guys supplementary stuff to do on your own or as a team. If you got a couple people there who are keen to go and do Horseshoe Bay, they'll give you a couple drills to do. Okay, why don't you guys try team time trials down Southwest Marine Drive Marine Drive if it's clear, or try this or that, right? So there will be supplementation if you guys are game for that. Just ask your coaches for those pieces at the end, and then there'll be more riding for you to do. So if you want to get a 4-hour ride out of it, for sure, we want to accommodate that. But we wanted to make this class about taking down all the barriers that we found just trying to get people trained, right? So by having you meet there and not having such a big emphasis on the whole day as a group component meant that we could see more people with a range of abilities, and then for you guys to meet each other and then hopefully make connections and build your rides out afterwards, or maybe even beforehand a little bit. So
yeah, we're excited not to have to get up at 5:30 anymore. 5.
Yeah, fair enough. And if this is a success, then we can talk about add-ons and all the rest. But just for transparency for everybody here, this is the first time we've ever run this, and we're super excited, and we hope it goes successfully. And if you guys support it, we're willing to take feedback and suggestions. Right from the outset, Velocity has been created by you, the clients, and listening to your feedback and be like, can we do this? Can we do that? You know, like even like Manette was talking about different coffee shops. I still remember that. And I've tried to incorporate
the Nemesis opened yesterday, yeah. Paul.
Okay, cool. So, you know, we've got coffee recommendations from Manette once a week. So I'm putting that on you for sure. Yeah. So like all these things we wanted to be about you and what you guys want. So you come back, right? So okay, let's.
Can I ask you just for the nutrition? Like, do you like have a drink and stuff like while you're doing the FTP test, or how do you do that optimally?
Okay, good question. Once the effort goes up really high, it's hard to eat and drink, right? So gels are tough, especially if you're buying goo gels and they got like toothpastey texture. Bars are like a no-no. I can't even get a bar in there. So that's why I have one drink mix that's got about 40 grams of carbohydrates in it, so that I can like keep doing something while I do the effort. I'll sip. And again, like if I'm sipping every 10 minutes, I'll probably sip when I get close to the first lookout. And that's about it. I do it just before I start, halfway through, and that's it. So if we're talking something more like the next workouts that you do, we're going to do at some point our classical Velocity workout, the 315s at threshold power. I would have something to eat and drink every time I finish an interval. So I'd have a couple shot blocks and wash it down right away, and then do my descent so I have time to digest it before I turn around and do the next interval. And that's a really good skill to practice for your events, because usually with our events, they're closed roads, controlled events where you can keep moving all the time. And most of us are ambitious to keep moving. We want to beat our best fondo times or keep up with our friends or be in the A group, all the rest of that. So you have to learn to eat and drink while you go. And sometimes the best time is at the top of a hill when you finish it and you're actually slowing. Oops. We're going to run out of time, so I might need to do another Zoom link to you guys. So we'll continue there in just a second. Okay. Okay.